Welcome to Health 2660. Here we don't just talk about health, we tell the stories that heal. Now please listen to the story. I used to think dementia came like a thunderstorm, suddenly, loudly, unmistakably. But in reality, it came like a slow fog. One day, my dad couldn't remember where he left the car keys. The next, he forgot the neighbor's name, Mrs. Henderson, who he'd known for over 40 years. A woman who brought him cookies every Christmas and always commented on how well kept his lawn was. Then, one afternoon, he looked right at me, his only daughter, his little girl, who he'd taught to ride a bike, who he'd walked down the aisle at her wedding, who he'd proudly introduced to everyone as the apple of my eye, and said, "Remind me again. Are you the nurse?" My heart cracked. It felt like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath and left me reeling. I was his daughter, Sarah, his only child, the one who used to dance on his feet in the kitchen while Sinatra played on the radio, his voice booming through the old speakers, filling the house with joy and laughter. I remembered the smell of Mom's pot roast simmering on the stove, the warmth of the oven, the feeling of Dad's strong hands holding me tight as we twirled around and around. But in that moment, I was just a stranger, a nameless, faceless caregiver in his increasingly blurry world. Dad had always been sharp, a crossword puzzle guy, completing the New York Times puzzle in ink every Sunday morning. A history buff, devouring biographies of presidents and generals and rattling off historical dates with impressive accuracy. Even at 72, he still fixed broken radios, meticulously soldering wires and replacing transistors, a skill he'd learned in the Army, and memorized football stats like a teenager, reciting player names and game scores from decades past. He was the rock of our family, the one we all turned to for advice and guidance, the one who always seemed to have the answer to every question. But over the past year, I noticed little changes, subtle shifts that at first I dismissed as normal aging. He'd repeat himself, telling the same story multiple times in a single conversation. He'd lose track of conversations, drifting off mid-sentence and staring blankly into space. He'd get confused, driving home from the grocery store he'd shopped at for 20 years, a familiar route that he could once navigate with his eyes closed. He even started misplacing things, leaving his glasses in the refrigerator or his wallet in the bathroom. At first, we blamed it on age. "He's just getting older," we'd say, trying to reassure ourselves. Then stress. Mom's passing had been hard on him, a devastating blow that had left him heartbroken and lost. Then maybe just too much time alone since Mom passed. He spent his days in the quiet house, surrounded by memories, but lacking the companionship he so desperately craved. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. This wasn't just forgetfulness. It was something more profound, something darker. The neurologist said it gently, choosing his words carefully. Early stage vascular dementia. I remember gripping the chair in the doctor's office, my knuckles white, trying not to cry. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled my nostrils, and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed to amplify my anxiety. Dad looked confused, but smiled anyway, like he was trying to protect me, like he sensed my distress, and wanted to reassure me that everything was going to be all right, even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. Afterward, while waiting for the Uber, he turned to me and asked with a childlike innocence that broke my heart, "Did the doctor say something important just now?" That night, I didn't sleep. The diagnosis echoed in my mind a relentless drumbeat of fear and uncertainty. I searched everything I could find online. Can dementia be reversed? Dementia and food. Best diet for brain health. I devoured articles, research papers, and blog posts, desperately seeking a glimmer of hope, a way to slow down or even reverse the progression of this terrible disease. I stumbled upon a YouTube video titled Foods That Fight Dementia. I watched it twice, then again, and my jaw dropped because the foods the doctor listed, they were all part of Dad's regular diet. The very foods that he consumed day in and day out without a second thought were potentially contributing to his cognitive decline. Refined carbs. Dad had toast every morning, slathered with butter and jelly, a comforting ritual that he'd followed for decades. Sugary drinks. His favorite was sweet tea, with every lunch a Southern tradition that he'd inherited from his own parents. Processed meat and fried food. Don't even ask. Dad loved his bacon and eggs for breakfast, his hot dogs and hamburgers for lunch, and his fried chicken and French fries for dinner. Vegetable oils and store-bought dressings. Check. He used canola oil for cooking and doused his salads in creamy ranch dressing. Artificial sweeteners. That too. He added artificial sweetener to his coffee and drank diet soda throughout the day. Low-quality farmed fish, canned goods, and pesticide-sprayed veggies. Almost every week, he bought whatever was cheapest and most convenient, without paying much attention to the source or the ingredients. And suddenly, it all started making sense. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, revealing a disturbing picture of how our modern diet, filled with processed foods and hidden toxins, was slowly eroding our health. I thought back to the last 10 years, how food labels had gotten longer, filled with unrecognizable ingredients and confusing jargon, how natural didn't always mean safe, and how food companies often used deceptive marketing tactics to mislead consumers, how healthy cereals were loaded with sugar, and how diet products were packed with artificial sweeteners and chemicals, and how my dad, like many others, had trusted the shelves, believing that the food he was buying was safe and nutritious. No one ever told us that everyday foods, sweetened yogurt diet soda, white bread microwave meals could fuel inflammation in the brain, or that chronic low-grade inflammation, blood sugar spikes, and gut imbalance could all quietly damage memory over time. It was like a slow burn, a silent fire that was gradually consuming his cognitive abilities. I felt angry, a burning righteous anger at the food industry for prioritizing profits over people's health, at the misleading labels for deceiving consumers and hiding the truth about what was in our food, at myself for not seeing it sooner, for not paying closer attention to what my dad was eating, for not protecting him from these hidden dangers. But I also felt determined, a fierce, unwavering determination to fight back, to do everything in my power to help my dad regain his cognitive function and live a longer, healthier life. Because maybe, just maybe, we weren't too late. Maybe there was still a chance to slow down the progression of the disease, to improve his memory, to bring him back from the fog. The next morning, I stood in Dad's kitchen and looked around. It was a scene of culinary despair. White bread, stale and lifeless, sat in a plastic bag on the counter. Fruit juice, loaded with sugar, filled a pitcher in the refrigerator. Canned soup, high in sodium, and preservatives lined the pantry shelves. Store-brand peanut butter, packed with hydrogenated oils and artificial sweeteners, occupied a prominent spot in the cupboard. A shelf of low-fat microwave dinners, filled with processed ingredients and empty calories, threatened to spill over. My heart sank. This wasn't just food. It was a lifetime of habits, cheap, convenient, comforting. A reflection of the modern American diet designed for speed and affordability, but lacking in nutrition and potentially harmful to our health. And now, possibly the slow poison behind his confusion. So I started with small swaps, simple changes that I hoped would make a big difference over time. Out went the sugary cereal. In came steel-cut oats with berries, a hearty and nutritious breakfast that was packed with fiber and antioxidants. I replaced margarine with avocado, a creamy and delicious spread that was full of healthy fats and vitamins. Sweet tea became herbal tea with a splash of lemon, a refreshing and hydrating beverage that was naturally caffeine-free and sugar-free. We ditched store-bought salad dressings and made our own with olive oil and apple cider vinegar, a simple and flavorful dressing that was free of artificial ingredients and unhealthy fats. Dad grumbled a lot. He was resistant to change, a creature of habit who didn't like to deviate from his routine. "This tastes like cardboard," he'd say, wrinkling his nose at the steel-cut oats. "This isn't real butter," he'd complain, eyeing the avocado with suspicion. But he kept eating, because deep down, he trusted me. He knew that I was doing this for his own good, that I wanted him to be healthy and happy. I didn't lecture him. I knew that wouldn't work. He was stubborn and set in his ways, and nagging him would only make him more resistant. Instead, I gently shared little facts at mealtime, casual tidbits of information about the connection between food and brain health. "Did you know the brain uses 20% of your body's energy?" I'd ask, as he munched on his new and improved breakfast. "Too much sugar can starve your brain of fuel," I'd say, as he reached for a second helping of herbal tea. "Your gut talks to your brain more than your brain talks to your body," I'd explain, as he sampled the homemade salad dressing. At first, he just rolled his eyes. He dismissed my pronouncements as silly health fads, and he continued to grumble about the changes to his diet. But over time, I saw something shift, a subtle but noticeable change in his attitude. He started asking questions. "What's this seed you added to the smoothie again?" he'd inquire, peering into the glass with curiosity. "Is this fish the kind with the good fat or the mercury?" He'd ask carefully, examining the salmon on his plate. "Didn't you say green tea helps fight inflammation?" He'd remember reaching for a cup after dinner. He was listening. He was trying. He was starting to understand the importance of food and its impact on his health. About 3 weeks in, something happened. Something small, but significant. We were watching TV, a rerun of Jeopardy, one of Dad's favorite shows. A trivia question popped up on the screen. Who was the 4th president of the United States? Before I could even guess, Dad blurted out, "James Madison." I turned to him stunned. He grinned, a genuine, unforced grin that lit up his face and banished the fog from his eyes. It was a glimmer, not a miracle, not a cure, but a spark, a flicker of recognition, a moment of clarity, a sign that his memory was still there, buried beneath the fog of dementia. And for the first time in months, I felt something too. Hope, a fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, we could make a difference. The truth is, there were still bad days. Days when the fog rolled in, thick and heavy, obscuring his memories and clouding his mind. Some mornings, he forgot what month it was, asking if it was still January in the middle of July. Other days, he retold the same story twice in 1 hour, oblivious to the fact that he'd already shared it. But he was sleeping better. The restless nights and constant tossing and turning had subsided, replaced by a more peaceful and restful slumber. His mood improved. The irritability and frustration that had plagued him for months had lessened, replaced by a calmer and more cheerful demeanor. And most of all, he was engaged. He was more present, more alert, more interested in the world around him. We added brain games to our routine, Sudoku crossword puzzles and memory challenges that we found online, went on daily walks, strolls through the park where we admired the flowers, watched the birds, and chatted about everything and nothing. Started Meatless Mondays, a fun and creative way to explore new vegetarian recipes and reduce our consumption of saturated fat. Switched to pasture-raised eggs and wild sardines, healthier and more sustainable alternatives to the conventional options he'd been eating. Slowly, the fog lifted, not completely, but enough for him to find himself again in moments. Fleeting glimpses of the man he used to be, the man I knew and loved. And those moments, they were everything. They were precious and irreplaceable reminders of the bond we shared and the love that still connected us. One day, I walked in and found Dad at the kitchen table, humming Sinatra. His voice was a little shaky, but the melody was unmistakable. He was cutting up fresh spinach for a salad. "Did you know this stuff helps protect neurons?" he said, lifting a leaf and waving it like a flag. I almost laughed and cried at the same time. It was a moment of pure joy, a testament to the power of food and the resilience of the human spirit. This wasn't just about food anymore. It was about fighting back, about not giving up to a disease that steals your memories bite by bite. It was about reclaiming his health, his happiness, and his life. I don't know what the future holds for my dad. Dementia is complex. It doesn't vanish because you eat kale or stop drinking soda. There's no magic bullet, no easy cure. But I do know this food matters, not just for the body, but for the brain, for mood, for memory. It's fuel for our cognitive function, nourishment, for our emotions, and a source of comfort and connection. And for us, changing what was on his plate helped change what was possible. It gave him back some of his memory, some of his joy, and some of his life. If you're watching someone you love fade, don't wait. Start with the food. Start with a conversation. Start with hope, because sometimes the smallest change, one less soda, one more walk, one homemade meal, can bring someone back into the light, even if just for a moment. And sometimes, a moment is all we need. A moment of connection, a moment of clarity, a moment of love. A moment to remind us that even in the face of dementia, there is still life, there is still hope, and there is still love. Health 2660. Thanks you for listening. We'll see you in the next video, and until then, be kind to yourself.